Welcome back to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm Ollie Hayes, and today I'm bringing you a video assessing the manager, Sean Dyche. Is he under pressure, and what needs to change? Joined today by Mike from the Unholy Trinity Everton podcast. How you doing, Mike?
Not too bad, mate. Not too bad. Yeah, looking forward to discussing the manager. That's for sure.
It's probably one of the hottest topics, isn't it? In terms of the fan base at the moment. I think it's probably one of the most divisive times as an Everton fan base. I think there's a lot of people that want Dyche gone, but there's also a lot of people that can understand that they want Dyche to stay. They can sort of understand what he's done for the club in the last 18 months. So let's just dive straight into it. Obviously, we talked briefly in the extra time review about the Southampton defeat and how disappointed we were in the immediate aftermath of that. But it did come off the back of a five-game unbeaten run. So, do you think it's maybe a little bit reactionary to talk about this Southampton defeat as, disappointing and putting the manager under pressure, or, do you think it was maybe a sign of things to come from recent performances? Obviously, we talked about the Fulham game in depth as well in that Southampton review.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at the whole thing, haven't you? Let's get it right. And people who listen to our show will know that I've been complimentary of the manager in terms of since he's come in because we were never going to truly know the behind the scenes stuff and how much has actually gone on. We know it's been difficult. We know there's been financial problems. We know all about the fallout with the board from a fan perspective. We know about the points deductions and the PSR charges. They're the things which are out there now. A lot of stuff's gone on behind the scenes that we'll never be privy to unless he does release his 5-part book series, which he said he might do one day. So I think that we need to understand that there's a lot more that happens that we never ever find out. So let's remember that, to a point that
Yeah.
he, for me, was probably the ideal man to come in and do what he did. He's got big, broad shoulders. He's taken on many roles in the club at his time because he's had to. And it's been a very, very difficult operating environment for him to actually do his job in. So we can't forget that. I think the thing which gets to me probably this season, as opposed to the last two, is that I feel the squad is more balanced this season, and I think the message that's come out of the club and the manager does it as well. That if we can just get to Bramley Moore, a Premier League side, then that's all okay. And of course, that is an aim and an objective, but it shouldn't be the aim and the objective. For me, this squad is good enough to finish in and around mid-table, and I think coming out with that message all the time, saying it, just about staying in the Premier League. What does that say about the atmosphere and the message behind the scenes that it's okay if you poor, for 5 out of 10 games, because all we need to do is get to this particular points total, and that's the objective of this season. That's wrong. That's defeatist. I think it's negative, and I think it sets a dangerous precedent, especially with the fact that the manager's out of contract in the summer.
Mm.
You've got multiple players. We've got 12 players who were contracted post summer, so that's dangerous as well because
Mm.
can they switch off? Do they switch off? Is the
Mm.
motivation really there? I can't answer that question. Only they can. You've got the director of football. He's out of contract. And then over all of that, you got a takeover, which fingers crossed is going to go through in the coming weeks as well. So I think at the moment, it's almost as if I think I read it somewhere the other day. The club's almost feels like it's on pause
Mm.
at this moment in time. And that's quite dangerous, I think, in terms of what it creates behind the scenes. And then, you look at the performances we've had so far this season. Let's get it right. There's been a drop off compared to
Mm.
last season to this season, and that's a big concern at the moment.
Yeah, no, I listen, I actually couldn't have said anything better myself there. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think it could be really damaging as a team and as a club, using that. Listen, as you said, it is an aim to get to Bramley Moore as a Premier League club. That's what we want. Ultimately, this whole thing about biggest stadium in the Championship, best ground in the Championship, we don't want it to come true. So it is an aim to get to Bramley Moore as a Premier League club. That can't be denied, but that shouldn't be used as the main aim, as you said. That should just be the baseline. That should be just if for whatever reason stuff goes wrong, that should just be the baseline. So I think setting that precedent early doors. I mentioned it in the Southampton review briefly. Setting the precedent early doors about talking about relegation battles in game week 2. After we lost to Tottenham 4-0 away there, listen, that day it was not a good performance from the team, but I do think tactically we could have been better that day. But Dyche in the post-match interviews and various press releases after that, he was talking about relegation battles, and in the second week of the season, you don't want to be talking about that. So it's kind of like he's bringing the players down to a level to try and make him this superficial hierarchical person at the top of the squad who's above them all. I don't know. It just seems a little bit dangerous, as you said, to be creating a mentality in the squad that they're not good enough for mid-table. Because I agree with you. I think the squad is definitely there. The squad is probably the most balanced it's been in Dyche's entire tenure. I think if you look at the squad he inherited when he came in, that squad didn't even have a striker. Dominic Calvert-Lewin was very injury prone. I think in his opening game we started. Was it either Damari Gray up front or someone else? And I think Ellis Sims made 3 starts, one at Manchester United away, one at Arsenal away, and then one at Anfield as well. So if you look at the squad then comparing to what it is now, I do think I agree with you. It is a lot more balanced. So is he getting the best out of this squad? Is he getting the tactical benefits of having the players that he's got? I'm not so sure. I just don't think he's getting the best out of the players. Lumping it long to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I don't think Dominic Calvert-Lewin likes playing that kind of system. I don't think he likes playing that kind of structure as this target man player, as this target man forward. But it does seem like when Beto comes on, we seem to get more crosses into the box, don't we? So why are we tailoring our team to play better when Dominic Calvert-Lewin is great in the air? He can, come alive in that 6-yard box where he can be a poacher like we saw under Carlo Ancelotti. So I just don't think the tactics are getting the best out of the team. And also, we're just losing that defensive reliability, aren't we? And we talked about Branthwaite not starting in the Southampton game in our extra time review, but it does feel like he does pick his favourites. And with Michael Keane and James Tarkowski being the starting 2 centre-halves for the last few games, with £70 million potential player and Jared Branthwaite there sat on the bench, it does leave a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth.
Yeah, I mean, we can understand certain decisions that are made. Again, things happen behind closed doors. We're not privy to the training. We don't know if people are carrying little niggles and little knocks. But I know for a fact that at the back end of last week, Michael Keane was receiving some kind of treatment at Finch Farm, but he still started against Southampton. So you've got to question, well, if you've got Jared Branthwaite, who is now he's post injury, he's been fully fit for a couple of weeks. He was given extra week training to get him right, to be good enough to be in that squad. But then you've got Michael Keane, who's carrying a niggle or whatever it might have been, and he starts over him. I can't understand that. And one way for the manager to win a little bit of favour back as we look ahead to West Ham is to put Jared Branthwaite back into that side. And you'll get there a few fans back on board. Okay, it's one or 2 games, too late. But yeah, he's made that the right decision. But I think that it's always difficult, isn't it? Because I know that they've got to manage expectations and of the fans especially, but we're not stupid. We've all tempered our expectations in recent years, and we all understand why we've had to. We know about the issues we've had off the field, and the takeover problems and things like that. And we know that Bramley Moore is costing an arm and a leg. We know all of that, and it impacts, of course it does. But you've also got to look at things sensibly and say, well, is this side, like we were saying earlier on, is it more balanced? Well, it is. Is there a better quality of attacking player in that side now? Yes, there is. Have we got, are we missing a few players in certain positions? Yes, quality wise, totally agree. We should have got a right back in. We should have got probably a new left back in. Most definitely, maybe another winger. But we've got to remember as well, we've got players to come back in. Don't forget it, the likes of obviously Chimiti, the likes of Brozier, so two attacking players there. So we're not far off getting close to our best squad, but the manager for me is not getting the best out of what he's got available. We know we've had injuries to key players. We all understand that, but I still feel that in certain games so far this season, we've massively underperformed. And as I say, there has been a drop off from what we saw at the back end of last season in terms of Everton can play away where we don't have a lot of the ball. We have say 35-40% of possession, but we can still be effective. One, when we've got it, and 2 in that final third and creating chances. And that's sort of gone away. The Fulham game, I thought we were terrible. You go back to the Fulham game at the
Mm.
first game of the previous season.
Mm.
Everton should have won about 5-1. I think Mope
Yeah,
missed
yeah, yeah.
about 3 or 4 chances. You look at it compared to this season, and it was night and day. Everton didn't deserve a thing from the Fulham game, really. And then Southampton, we had a few chances in the second half, but against a really, really poor side. And I think the manager's got to look at that and say, well, I can't simply just go into every single game and play exactly the same
Mm.
way. I've got to look at the opposition, and I'm sure that they do, by the way. I'm sure
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
not saying,
yeah.
I'm going, we're just going to play 4-5-1, and it's as simple as that. But I don't think there's enough intricacies within our setup. I think it's too much of the
Mm.
same all the time. And like you say, we'll go along to Calvert-Lewin. He's isolated. There's no one around him. So if he
Mm.
wins a flick on, how many times does he chase his own flick ons all the time? No one reads he's going to win it. He's great in the air. So if you're the
Mm.
Corey, if you're McNeil, read it. Just take the chance and go. There's no one ever there. He brings the ball down. He's having to go back. It's so one dimensional. And like you said, when Beto's coming on, okay, tiredness impacts the opposition, of course, it does at
Mm.
that particular point. But we're getting wide. He's buzzing around. We're getting balls into the box. Calvert Lewin, when Ancelotti was there, Calvert Lewin was playing his best football.
Mm.
How many goals did he score from crosses? It was a lot because he was told to play.
Mm.
And he said, you'll score your goals like Inzaghi, 6 yards, 7 yards out. That's where I want you to be. Never mind chasing balls down the flanks. You'll
Yeah.
get your goals by being in the box. And that's what we're not doing. We're not giving him the opportunity at times. I'm not saying he's being great. He's missed some decent
Mm.
chances, but give him the opportunity to put the ball in the back of the net. And that goes for Beto as well. Don't
Mm.
just be so one dimensional. Just keep on going long all the time because it's just not going to work.
No, I agree with you. I think partly with the getting the ball into the box with Calvert-Lewin, I think you have to look at him under Ancelotti. He did have Luca Dean, James Rodriguez, Gylfi Sigurdsson, players like that whipping the ball into him and hitting him, pretty much on his head most times. I think the drop off in quality in the squad since then, it has to be understood. I think Dyche inherited a significantly worse squad than what was left by Carlo Ancelotti when Rafa Benitez came in. But that being said, more has to be done tactically to get the ball into the box because, the amount of times Calvert-Lewin has had chances in the box, whether it be on his head or in that 6 yard box to try and poke the ball home, it's next to none, isn't it, really, under Sean Dyche? And I think that maybe comes in where he could maybe utilise a Nathan Patterson off the bench. He's more of a traditional attacking fullback, isn't he, compared to Ashley Young? He has a little bit more pace, and he can find a cross maybe a little bit better. That being said, if you look at the other side with Vitaly Mikalenko, stereotypically he is a defensive left back, isn't he? He does not get forward past the halfway line very often, and when he does, he seems to be all at sea, doesn't he? He seems to be a little bit lost. So I think it has to be understood that yes, okay, there is a drop off in quality in terms of service into Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but more definitely has to be done. I agree with you. More definitely has to be done in terms of creating chances. And it's interesting you mentioned the flick on things and Calvert-Lewin being so good in the air and winning those flick ons. Me personally, I think a change needs to happen to maybe 4-4-2. We mentioned it briefly in the Southampton extra time review where we were talking about Michael Keane going up front. What would stop us from going Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Beto up front? What is what harm could be done in doing that? And I think the Southampton game was definitely a perfect opportunity to do that.
Well, I think back to when Sean Dyche was manager of Burnley, he quite often had two big lads up front, didn't he?
Hmm. Yeah.
So I'm not obviously Burnley didn't play a great brand of football, but neither did we. And sometimes by having two players up front, you've got to work on it, of course, because you mentioned the thinking on the previous show when we were discussing about having two up front and how often Beto and Calvert-Lewin have been on the pitch at the same time. It's not very often. When they have been, sometimes you see them making similar runs, getting each other's way sometimes. But that's for them as strikers to work on the training ground, try and form a relationship. But that's very, very difficult when you don't get the opportunity to play on a Saturday together. And like you say, but in that kind of game, what's the worst that can happen? It's not as if we've come away and we've got beat anyway. So I'm not saying, if we go to Man City or Arsenal, Liverpool, whoever it might be, that we do exactly the same. But this is the thing, isn't it, about being a little bit different sometimes. He was almost, for me, he could have been forced into doing that because of the injury issues that we had. And he chose not to. He just chose to sort of stick to tight. Now, you could say it for an hour and it might not work. And okay, well, you've had a go. And the only way for it to actually get better and for those players to form a relationship is to do it more often. But then change it, bring on a 10 if you need to, change the formation again and get the opposition thinking about what you're doing, because it does create a little bit of havoc at times. We said earlier on about Michael Keane going up front in a two and against Fulham. They caused problems because it was two
Mm.
against two centre halves. Against Southampton there was three centre halves against one, and with the best will in the world, doesn't matter how good you are, you're not going to see much of the ball when you're fighting against three centre halves. So again, what is stopping the minds of doing it? Stubbornness potentially. Maybe he's a little bit apprehensive to do it because he feels like Ellie was a little bit more open, because when you got a number 10, they have a bit more of a defensive responsibility. He's not a fan of Beto in terms of from a defensive aspect, because he doesn't understand that side of the game. We scored his goal against Fulham, and we think, 1-1 draw, we'll take that point. And within about 10 seconds, he jumped on someone's back and fouled him in the free kick.
I
So he's
remember
not
that.
really. He just doesn't
Yeah.
understand that. Like, I'm not saying Calvert-Lewin's great at it, but he gets that side of the game more, and we've got to defend from the front. But if you do it in a two and you say to him, right, you've got no defensive responsibility, and Calvert-Lewin's the one who can buzz around a little bit and put the defense under a bit of pressure, then it could potentially work. But are we going to see it? I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I'm also not convinced. I think for me, as you said, I think for me the biggest thing is it's just the stubbornness and the lack of plan B, the lack of want to change and maybe try something new. Listen, I think if we'd have gone to Southampton, played 4-4-2 for 60 minutes, as you said, and come away from it from that experiment and it still being 0-0, I think a lot of fans would have said, okay, it didn't work. Beto and Calvert-Lewin didn't gel together up front. They've had an hour now. Let's change it and try and win the game from 0-0. Because, within 60 minutes, Southampton didn't create a chance to win that game. Like we were so firmly had that game in our grasp for that hour before, changes were made for Southampton, that an experiment would have been absolutely sound and we could have come away with it learning something new. But as you said, it's just the stubbornness and the lack of want to change and try and use something else. It's just this 4-5-1 that it's worked. Listen, it's worked. It's kept us in the Premier League for the last two seasons. That has to be said. The squad, I've said it earlier, that the squad that he inherited, 4-5-1 was probably the best option for him to use that just to stay defensively solid. But you know, as we've said earlier, the squad is more balanced now. The team is more balanced, so you can try and use different tactical options to try and win games. I think people have figured out the Sean Dyche blueprint and figured out ways to beat him in different ways. So I do worry that unless he does change, we're just going to keep spiraling and not winning games. And we're coming into a West Ham game, which we spoke about, and then we've got quite a difficult run after that. So I do worry that if results don't improve, could he lose the fans? I think a lot of fans are gone. I think me personally, I think I'm probably more towards the side of wanting him gone, and I'll just be honest on that. But you know, if we don't make changes now, could it spiral even further?
I mean, of course it could, and it's up to him. He's going to be in charge of the
Mm,
weekend. Of course he is. It's up to him to try and find a way, and you can be more accepting of
mm,
the way that we play if you're picking up results. So we sort of were for those 5 games, but we were still disappointed
mm,
the fact that we drew away at Leicester. That draw against Fulham wasn't
mm.
great. Newcastle was all right, and then obviously you can't argue with winning 2 games of football.
Yeah.
Although the first half against Palace was absolutely woeful. It was only a semi-decent second half performance that got us
Mm,
out of jail there. But I think that we've seen how it can work last season, especially. But last season we had very much a case of we were galvanised after our first points deduction. It was us against the world.
yeah.
When we got hit with the second one, it very much knocked us for quite a while.
Mm,
But as I say, it goes back to the motivation side, and with the manager out of contract in the summer, with that big reset button about to be pressed, fingers crossed. You got a lot of people at the club who aren't going to be part of the club's
mm,
immediate future. Let's get it
mm,
right, and they're just not. And I was all for, if Sean Dyche started this season well, and we had us in and around, sort of eighth, ninth at the moment, then he would deserve the right, if he had a decent season this season,
mm.
to see us into Bramley Moore and
Yeah.
potentially get another sort of 12, 18 months. I think if this season goes the way that it's currently going, and just say, for example, we don't get any higher than sort of 15, 16, something like that, then you've got to make the change. But it may come even sooner than we think, because the Freakins, they're going to be watching from not too far away. they've got to protect their investments. And if they see us struggling and go into the next international break, maybe three points above the bottom three, don't tell me that they won't look to pull the trigger, because they will instruct whoever they need to at the club to make this, to get rid of Sean Dyche, and they'll bring in somebody else. And I think he's on real dangerous territory at this moment in time. And body language, the way he's speaking, I think in press conferences, maybe we sort of overanalyze it, but it's not the Sean Dyche of last season, with that sort of that tenacity and that sort of dogged nature that he's got him. That's a bit of a concern. But you're only as good as your last game at the moment. Our last game was really, really poor, and he's got to try and put that right if he can on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, definitely. I think as you said, the tenacity's gone from him. The kind of the bite back ability to go to the media. I think it's lost from him a little bit. I think he feels a lot more defensive this season. I think he maybe knows something that we don't, in terms of, does he know that he won't be here at the end of this season? Because obviously, as we've said already, that his contract is going to be ending. A lot of players in and around there won't be in the immediate future of the club, as you said. So will he leave at the end of the season rather than mid-season? I'm not 100% sure. I think, as you said, if results continue to spiral and we don't get any higher in the table than we currently are, I think the Freakins will look to press the button. But that being said, if he can boost us up to mid-table, I don't think we're in any immediate danger of getting a points deduction. I think the general consensus around the club that is we're going to be safe from any points deductions. So I think if he can push us up into mid-table, I think you maybe look at it at the end of the season and go, well, you've got us to mid-table, you've maybe taken us as high as you can. Is this your ceiling? And you maybe shake hands at the end of the season and go, we're going to go for someone else.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the best case scenario for him, is that he gets to the end of the season, and like you say, it's nice one, Sean. Thanks very much. We're going to go a different route, and I think we'd all like that, because that would mean that we've had a semi decent season. We had a comfortable season. If we're finishing in and around mid table, but I still think that the new owners are going to want to look to go in a new direction, and that is to, and I hate this word because I'm sick and tired of saying it, is to create a new identity, and the right identity for this football club. It's a project. We want to bring in a young progressive mindset. We want to have a different style of football. We don't want to be, we've had too many years now of just sort of plodding along and having relegation battles and playing this boring brand of football. And it's a big opportunity, I think, hopefully, when this takeover goes through and we finish the season off, to really sort of put their stamp on the club and say, right, this is who we are. Brand new stadium. We want to look to get European football in the next sort of 2 to 3 years. We want to bring in this kind of manager. You've only got 12 players who are in contract. So it's a real big opportunity for us in the summer to actually rip up the current blueprint, if there is one there, and start afresh. And I think that, unfortunately for Sean Dyche, he won't be part of that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Listen, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit now, and we're talking about creating a new identity. Who's your ideal replacement for Sean Dyche at the end of the season?
I think it's really difficult, because it's always who is available, isn't it? And you always see these sort of obscure young minds appear from nowhere as well. And I think it's really, really difficult. I think you've got to look at a manager who is sort of not green, who's earned the stripes, but wants to play a particular brand of football. I mean, obviously, Graham Potter gets mentioned, of course he does. I mean, I'm concerned in terms of he struggled with the pressure at Brighton. He made reference to that himself. Well, listen, if you come here, mate, it's 100 times worse.
Yeah.
You try and deal with, imagine that South stand, if we get beat at home 3-0 by Southampton or something like that. You know what I mean? It'd be unforgiving. So I'm concerned about him when he stepped up to Chelsea. Didn't do particularly well. But he'll be a name that's mentioned, and maybe he could be the man. I don't know. I don't want a Mourinho type. I don't want this ego in the dressing room. I don't think he'd be a good fit. He's more like a cartoon character nowadays, isn't he? So I think it's difficult. I mean, there's Thomas Frank gets mentioned, doesn't he? What happens with Eddie Howe at Newcastle? He's who knows with them? Do they want to go up a level again? If they do, let's get it. Let's get it right. I think Eddie Howe's done pretty well at Newcastle, better than many thought that he would. To be honest, so maybe that's another one. But it's always difficult to actually nail down a sort of name. I mean, I mentioned Lee Carsley, but I don't think Lee Carsley has done enough to warrant the Everton job. I think that
Yeah.
people get carried away because he got given the interim England manager's job, but that was because he was part of the system. So I think, yeah, I think maybe Eddie Howe will be mentioned. I think that his time at Newcastle could come to an end over the course of this season.
Mhm.
Thomas Frank possibly will be mentioned, and probably Graham Potter. But as I say, there's always an obscure young European manager who will come up as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, I think I agree with you, your Thomas Frank shout. I think he's a manager that I'd quite like to get. One mad stat that I saw this afternoon actually was that we've not employed a manager outside the Premier League since David Moyes, obviously, since we took David Moyes from Preston. So, maybe looking further afield could be something that we could bear fruits from. But yeah, certainly Thomas
What
Frank, I
about
think is
Carlo?
a I'd love Carlo back. Listen, he was
Let's get him back in.
I'd love Carlo back. I think he's probably closer to retirement though than he is ever coming back to Everton. But listen, he loves Crosby, doesn't he? I think he'd love to come back.
Yeah, we get a shot that it goes back to the Strando now. It's a far cry from what it was.
But yeah, Carlo, I'd love him back. Thomas Frank, he's a manager that I definitely like. Carlos Corberán at West Brom, I think he's
Mm.
doing decent work at West Brom. I think they were in trouble a couple of seasons ago, and he's got them to a real prosperous position down there at West Brom. Sebastian Hoeneß at Stuttgart, I think is a manager that I think is gaining a lot of traction in the media at the moment. I think he's doing quite good work at Stuttgart. Don't really know too much about him. I think he's got a decent brand of football, but not really researched him too much. So I think there's definitely option there. But I think Stuttgart are looking at inserting a £6 to £7 million release clause into his contract, anticipating some interest from the summer. So that could
Mm.
definitely be one to look at. But yeah, I think we've still got Sean Dyche at the moment. I think it's the biggest question of who's available at the time. I think that's probably the biggest question when you're searching for a new manager. But yeah, the Thomas Frank shout is a good one. Eddie Howe again, I think I'd agree with that. He's done very good work at Newcastle, so I think I'd be pleased with that as well.
Yeah, as I said, it's always hard because you've got to see who is available at the time, and you can have a manager that you want, but Everton aren't going to go out and spend £10 million on bringing a manager in, are they? They're just not going to do that. We've still going to have financial restraints. Obviously, should be a bit easier again. Obviously, Bramley Moore will start paying off pretty quickly as well in terms of the revenue we bring in for the stadium, match days, obviously other events as well, naming rights, everything like that.
Yeah, yeah,
So that will all help, but it'll take a bit of time to sort of get on a sort of fair financial footing. But it's going to be someone who's obviously achievable, who's
mm,
available, who's ambitious. I think
mm,
is also a really important thing, and somebody that obviously I think that the Freakins assuming the takeover goes through. I
mm.
always say assuming because you just
Yeah,
never know with everything, do you?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But they're going to want to make sure that they make an appointment. I think that one is obviously right for this new identity of the club, but I think someone with that the fans can really get behind as well. We can't be going back with like if you Moyes and people like that. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
he'll be mentioned if Dice goes. By the way, he will be
Yeah,
mentioned,
he will.
of course, because he's available, and I think he'd come back in a heartbeat. Even if he said to him, "Give us 6 months, David," we'll think, well, I can try and work my way into a
Yeah.
2 or 3 year deal here. But we've got to look to it's a really, really important thing, this, that we've got to look to draw a line under everything to do with Goodison Park, what's gone before, and look ahead to what's on the horizon, literally. And that is a brand new stadium, a brand new football club, brand new owners, brand new manager, and brand new players effectively. And that's for me what it's all about.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The big reset. I'm definitely looking forward to it. But that's all we've got time for today on our debate about Sean Dyche. Let us know your thoughts in the comments about Dyche and potential managers coming in. But Mike, thank you very much for coming on. It's been great to speak to you and a really good debate and good to hear from you there.
Absolute pleasure, mate.
That's all we've got time for today. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon.